Miami may not be the underdog anymore, but they do get to be the villain.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Fiesta Bowl can't get here soon enough. Thursday night, 7:30 p.m., Miami Hurricanes, Ole Miss Rebels. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube. We're part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to rugiet.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. On this loaded episode, there's a really compelling transfer portal quarterback domino. Like, this one's already causing lawsuits, and even if Miami doesn't get this particular player, this particular move could trickle down to the Hurricanes. We will explain. We'll talk about styles making fights here, the pace of play that Ole Miss brings to the table, some of the keys for this football game. But how about this one, folks? When I connected early this morning with, and if you haven't checked out the episode, please do. We did a crossover episode with Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss. Great show, hell of a guy. And before we even started the episode, first thing Steven says to me is, all right, Dono, how does it feel to know that the only people rooting for your team are in Coral Gables and possibly Baton Rouge because they don't want Lane's exes to win without him, right? Everybody else is rooting for Ole Miss. Like, Ole Miss is being painted as that team of destiny. And if not for their narrative, I believe Miami would be looked at as that team of destiny, the team that barely made it into the playoff, and a lot of people thought they shouldn't have. But when you've got, a team whose head coach left them high and dry right before the playoffs, and he's plucking assistant coaches from there at the worst possible time, and he's trying to tamper with their players, and you don't know who's coaching on any given day at Ole Miss, like, They have become a team that, outside of our circles here among the Miami Hurricanes fans, like, it's become so easy for America to root for Ole Miss. And now our Miami Hurricanes are the team that are standing in the way of what would be possibly a Disney movie. If the Rebels can pull this off, if they can win on Thursday night, and if they can go on to win on January 19th, Miami now has become public enemy number one. And so when Steven asked me, how does it feel to know that Baton Rouge, Coral Gables are the only people rooting for the Hurricanes? I said it feels fantastic. I love this. We live for this, right? Miami fans, if you go back to the 80s and 90s, especially if you go back to the Jimmy Johnson days, and anyone who's ever seen the You documentary, this is our wheelhouse, man. It is our wheelhouse to be the team with the target, to be the team that people are rooting against, to be the team that people have a problem with. And I know it's not just me. It's not just you watching this and listening to this. It's also Mario Cristobal. It's also his staff. And it's also his players who embrace this villain mentality right now. And it's not to say these are bad people. I mean, anybody who follows Miami knows this is an unbelievable collection of young men, really, really great guys, and they've got great chemistry, and they're motivated. They work hard every single day. So when I use the word villain, I'm not saying these are bad people who do bad things. Like, these are hardworking, fine young men who go out there and bust their butts every single freaking day. But the situation makes them the team that very few people actually want to see win this game. And I'm glad we have something like that. Not that you need a whole lot of extra motivation when you're one victory away from essentially hosting a national championship game, because if Miami wins on Thursday, come Monday, January 19th, you're playing at Hard Rock Stadium for a national title if you can get through a really good Ole Miss team first. So not that you should need extra motivation, but anything you can do psychologically to get that advantage, whether it be someone saying Ruben Bain is not a threat or won't be a factor, and he can put that in his notebook, or whether it be logging into your social media and knowing very few people want to see you win this game on Thursday night. And yeah, as I mentioned, Miami are not the underdogs this time around, right? They were slight underdogs on the road at Texas A&M. You pull off the upset. They were underdogs against Ohio State, the defending champs. Miami is not supposed to be here. Neither is Ole Miss, by the way. Ole Miss was supposed to lose to Georgia. Miami was supposed to lose to Ohio State. You were supposed to get the Buckeyes versus the Dogs this time around. This is why you play the games. So both teams have played an underdog role heading into this one. But Miami is, according to FanDuel, our sports betting partner, a 3.5-point favorite for this game. But people are going to be rooting for those underdogs. And this is something that Keionte Scott talked about. And again, I feel bad to even use the word villains when you're talking about people like this, because Keionte Scott is so driven, right? This was the guy who was literally, along with a few of his teammates, he was sleeping at the facility during fall camp. Like, they were putting in so much extra work. They didn't have time to go back to their apartments or their student housing, wherever these guys live. They were sleeping in the facility. Keionte Scott was leading that charge during fall camp. That's how dialed in he is. And Keionte Scott said at Media Day that, quote, "We are the most hated team in the field in the country," he says. He continued, "That fuels us, you know? Everything is on your plate, hearing how you're not good enough." And, of course, Miami has a leader like Mario Cristobal, who instills upon them that they never want to be satisfied. So that's the mentality Keionte Scott and his teammates are taking into this game. And listen, Keionte also referenced, and I know in this particular scenario, yeah, Miami is favored to win this game. But like he mentioned, when you log into your social media, you know, people are saying, hey, Miami shouldn't be here. They're not good enough. You know, probably talking about Cristobal, you know, the things people say about Mario, the guy's just not a winner. He can't win big games. Won a pretty big game against Ohio State. Won a pretty big game on the road against Texas A&M. Even going back to his time at Oregon, won a really big game on the road at Ohio State 2021. So, you know, he's changing that narrative. And these players, they want to change that narrative about what Miami is. Because we all know what Miami used to be. Miami used to be a team that 80s, 90s, early 2000s would just run roughshod on college football. But over the last 20-plus years, Miami has been known as a team that is all hype and not enough substance. Until now, because the substance is clearly there, right? Miami were the off-season champs. They joke about us. The U is back, they say, and they go 7-6. Like, used to be the butt of a lot of jokes. Well, this team, as Bruce Warner said at the Truth Teller the other day, Miami is not back. Miami is here, right? Miami has arrived. And Keionte Scott also discussed the challenges in facing an Ole Miss offense who, you know, I believe is the best offense Miami has faced so far this year. So this is going to be a huge challenge. And what sticks out about Ole Miss and why it's really important for Miami to dictate the pace of play. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, we mentioned FanDuel has Miami as 3.5-point favorites in this one. College football playoff is all here, my friends. FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them right there in the app. Here's what I love about it. You get to use the profit boost on the bets you already feel good about. Ride with the favorite when you think a team controls the matchup. Take a shot on the underdog if you feel an upset coming, or you build a parlay around the players and moments you think decide the game. Then you apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is the perfect playoff football situation. FanDuel is the best place to get in on the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost on every game day. Thank you to the Everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. And if you're an Everydayer, you want to check out the Everydayer Club. You can click the link in the show notes below or go to lockedoncanes.supercast.com and try the all-access tier. As soon as I wake up in the morning, I record the Canes Colada while I'm sipping my coffee. I give you my thoughts on the day. Talked a lot about this portal quarterback situation, which we will get into on this full episode, right? You get an exclusive newsletter, one-on-one texting with me. LockedOnCanes.supercast.com. Try the all-access tier of the Everydayer Club today. Keionte Scott, who has just... he's been an engine for Miami in these playoffs so far. Had a tremendous regular season. You remember in the NC State game, which was Miami's 10th game of the year, he got injured. We weren't sure if we'd ever see him in a Hurricanes uniform again, but he was able to rehab his, I think it was a toe injury, very, very quickly. He was very, very motivated to get back on the field. And since returning, made game-changing plays against Texas A&M, led Miami in tackles, made obviously game-changing plays against Ohio State. He had a pick six in that game. In a game Miami won by 10. They got a defensive touchdown from Keionte in that one. So he's just really brought Miami to another level. And, he understands, going up against Trinidad Chambliss and a really well-rounded group of wide receivers. Scott said about their offense, quote, "I think they're a great offense. They do what they do well. Great quarterback, great receiver room, great offensive line. It's something we're focused on," he said. An offense that wants to run fast pace. When they want to put you on islands, different things that can beat you. I feel like it's going to be a great opportunity for us and for our defensive room. They do a good job of getting people on islands, attacking the zones. They just do a tremendous job. They have threats all over the field. Yeah, that's something that stands out about Ole Miss. Like, they don't have one or two receivers who hog up all the targets and the yardage. They're 4 and 5 deep. Like, Trinidad Chambliss spreads the football out a ton, which I think does make it more challenging for a defensive backfield. He says, as a defense, we get excited the opportunity to go up against an offense like this. Chambliss talked about how one of the things that we're going to have to watch, it's why we've been saying all week here on Locked On Canes, for Miami's defensive line, to me, it's more about containment than it is about the number of sacks. Yeah, I'd love it if Miami gets a handful of sacks in this one. Don't get me wrong. And in fact, Keionte Scott on the blitz is someone who's provided a lot of sacks this season and this postseason. But to me, it's more about keeping Chambliss contained, because if you overcommit to sack him, when he gets outside the pocket, scrambles, and improvises, that's when he's the most dangerous, right? There's, there are some things about Chambliss that are kind of reminiscent of what we watched with Cam Ward at Miami last year with the way he extends plays. So Scott talked about that, quote, "It's something that we're just mentally prepared for on him extending plays. That's something we've been practicing all week. We feel like every offense we play is the best offense. Ole Miss is really going to be a good challenge," he said. And he added, everyone on defense just needs to do their assignments. This is a game that's so much about discipline. And, in terms of, we'll get into pace of play for a second, but Miami has tried to simulate that as much as possible. Coach Heatherman talked about it. The Ole Miss Rebels, you talk about a team that's going to try to gas out your defense. They're going to try to keep your defense off balance, and they're going to try to play so fast that you can't make substitutions. Like, they want to tire out Miami's big defensive line as much as possible. And the Rebels, they rank 11th nationally in the amount of plays they run per game. It's 74.2. So they're top 11 in the country at that. They're top 20 in the country in the quickest time per play at an average of 23.9 seconds. So they don't often let the play clock bleed down the way that Miami does. Miami, conversely, teams that play two very different styles on offense. Miami's offense ranks 91st nationally at 66.8 plays per game. They try to, overall, they limit the number of possessions for both teams if you're controlling the clock. And Miami ranks 130th in seconds per play at 30.1. So Miami tends to take that play clock down a lot farther. So the Hurricane scout team has had a really important job. And again, Corey Heatherman feels that his defense is prepared to go up against that pace of play. It's not going to be the first time they've seen something like that. SMU, USF was another big one. Obviously, Miami lost the USF game, or they lost the SMU game. It wasn't really because of the pace of play. It was because of a lot of other things. Miami performed well against USF in that regard, but you want to try and force as many third and longs as possible. And then, of course, offensively for Miami, the biggest key, I think, is establishing your running game. You're going up against the 65th ranked rushing defense in the country. There should be some vulnerabilities there from the Rebels. You want to get Mark Fletcher going for a number of reasons, because not only can Mark Fletcher pick up yardage, move the chains, but he can also wear down an opposing defensive line. Fletcher talked about it, and he didn't say this in a way that was disrespectful to Ole Miss. I know people are trying to spin it that way, the whole context thing, but Fletcher was asked in general about the style that he runs with and the style that Miami's offensive line, where they love to outmuscle people. And he talked about how it's a great feeling when you make opposing defenses quit. It's what Miami tries to do. And he wasn't saying that Ole Miss were quitters or anything. Like, there was no disrespect intended. But that's what Miami is going to try to do. That's what they try to do every time they play. They try to wear you down, right? It's why, how many times have we said it? Certainly in the last 2 games, Fletcher has had his best drives at the end of games. Like, he softens you up, and then all of a sudden he's breaking off a 19-yard run, when a lot of times earlier in games it's 4 or 5 yards. Those 4 or 5 yards turn into 14, 15 yards later on after he's wearing down a defense. So Miami is going to try to limit the number of possessions for Ole Miss, because it's a team that tries to run a lot of plays. They don't necessarily win the time of possession, but if Miami can limit the amount of time Chambliss spends on the field, and if Miami can get a timely takeaway or two, it's going to go a long way for the Hurricanes to win this one. We got more really good injury news yesterday. Things continue to trend in a positive direction. So the latest on starting cornerback O.J. Frederique. And folks, I mentioned Ole Miss has a deep receiving core, which means we need all hands on deck for this one. Miami's got one of the best defensive backfields in the country. You want to have O.J. Frederique healthy alongside Xavier Lucas and Ethan O'Connor, and of course Keionte Scott is healthy again, and Jacoby Thomas and Zechariah Poyser at the safeties are playing incredibly well, and we'd like to get Damari Brown back as well. We'll talk about him in a second, but O.J. Frederique went from probable to not listed. Not listed is good. That means you're not even on the injury report. So O.J. Frederique is going to play in Miami's defensive backfield. It sounds a little iffy on Damari Brown coming back from injury, but it does seem like there's a chance, and I think he has gotten some work in practice. So if Damari can return to Miami's DB room, that would be monstrous. And speaking of monstrous, I would say Ahmad Moten Sr. is a monstrous guy in the interior of Miami's defensive line. And Corey Heatherman said, these are his words, he is very confident that Ahmad Moten is going to play. Moten got injured early on in the Ohio State game, missed most of it, and it looks like Miami's going to have one of their starting defensive tackles back as well. So things outside of, still being, I guess, iffy on Damari Brown, things are trending really positively for some of the banged up players in Miami's defense. So that's going to be good news for the Hurricanes. Something we've talked about this a couple times on the show. In fact, Bruce Warner brought it up yesterday. That turning point for Miami after they lost the SMU game, 6-2. They had lost 2 out of their past 3. Miami's playoff hopes were on life support at that time. Mario Cristobal had told the story about the team meeting that they had after the SMU loss, where they watched a 12-minute reel of film in silence of Miami making their best plays during their 5-game winning streak to start the year. And then they all realized and they all internalized that they had to get back to that they knew how good they could be, and they had to get back to playing that way. Keonte Scott also told the story from his perspective about that meeting, because he was asked about it. It was a moment where we had to sit down and look each other in the face and ask a simple question. Are we the team we think we are? He said. That was the biggest thing. Everybody got up and was able to speak, he said. We heard everybody's hearts, and some players in there shedding tears and telling us stories of how they got there, why they needed this so much. That was something we felt a switch hit, and we got connected. We realized if we're the team we think we are and we want to get where we need to go, then we all need each other. That was a big thing. Everyone helping each other no matter what. We all need each other, he said. So, powerful, because, we'd heard about the film session and everything. We hadn't heard the perspective of, the way the players actually spoke to each other, and about themselves in that moment. This team is made of the right stuff. It goes to show you what these guys were able to do both psychologically and physically to turn things around after their lowest moment. So tested when it comes to adversity, right? And of course, you're going up against a team that's also battle tested from an adversity point of view, losing coaches, before a playoff run. So Miami and Ole Miss, no strangers to fighting through tough times. Can't wait to see how this game plays out. Let's talk some transfer portal when we come back. Somebody is being accused of tampering. I don't think it's Miami this time, but the Big Ten is big mad. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, let's talk about something that most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life. It doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rugiet Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rugiet Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rugiet Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in one mint that dissolves under the tongue so it absorbs fast. The science behind Rugiet Ready stands out. 3 clinically proven ingredients in one formula designed for both mental and physical readiness. You connect with a board-certified doctor online, and everything ships discreetly to your door. It's easy to understand why over 150,000 men have already made the switch. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now is the time. Head to rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, and feel ready. Thank you to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. For your next listen, make sure to check out Locked On ACC. I had to take some time off from that show while I was traveling around Europe, but I will be back with Kenton Gibbs, and I can't wait to talk more Miami versus Ole Miss with him. Locked On ACC, like this show, is available free wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of this #1 Locked On Podcast Network. DeMond Williams, quarterback of the Washington Huskies. He made headlines on Tuesday night. Couldn't remember what day it was here. On Tuesday night, DeMond Williams makes headlines because he entered the transfer portal. Now, this stirs up controversy. This is a really good quarterback. So you can understand, he was allegedly going to be one of the top paid quarterbacks in America at Washington. So he's probably going to get even more money from somebody else, who else may be. But this is stirring up controversy because DeMond Williams, 4 days prior to entering the transfer portal, had just signed a new NIL deal, a new revenue sharing deal to return to Washington. And then 4 days later, I'm out. Now, UW, they haven't specified who yet, but they claim they have, some kind of evidence, and they're going to be possibly pursuing legal action for tampering, that some school tampered with him. Now, we see how the Big Ten has their standard revenue sharing agreements that all of their schools use. We've run into this issue before with Xavier Lucas, who's now at Miami. Now, that one to me was a little bit more cut and dry, in the favor of the player who left, because they illegally denied him entry into the transfer portal, and then he took matters into his own hands. He found a legal loophole to unenroll from Wisconsin and enroll as a student at Miami before landing on the football team. His lawyer, Darren Heitner, he did some great lawyering. He found a legal loophole to get Xavier Lucas out, who ends up at Miami. Now, even though Miami is, and I think there could be something there, linked as a potential suitor in the DeMond Williams process, because, Miami, we think they're going after transfer portal quarterbacks, and he's one of the best available. So there's going to be some links to Miami here, but the buzz has been, and, I don't know how reputable the sourcing is on this, but the buzz has been, if somebody allegedly tampered with him or is being accused of that, it's a Lane Kiffin LSU thing. So I think Miami's hands are clean on this one. If somebody enticed him with a big offer to enter the transfer portal, it sounds like that, allegedly may have been the LSU Tigers. The talk coming out of Washington is they want to force him to stay there and play. Like this might just be the line that they're drawing in the sand to try to, give their position, hoping that he's going to at least have to, pay them financial damages to buy himself out of the NIL deal. But they're talking about forcing him to play, which is like, I mean, I know the situation sucks for Washington, but is that the move? When you've got starting quarterback, which is the most important position in football and also the most important leadership position in your locker room, you want to force a guy who doesn't want to be there to play. And I know when I tweeted about this, I've had some comments of people like, you got to honor the contract. What are we doing here? This is the wild, wild west. It's not that cut and dry. So the deal that Williams signed, which is like the deal that, Xavier Lucas allegedly signed last year, it's not a football contract. Like, this is not the NFL where you sign a contract to play football and you are an employee of that team. That's not what this is. It's a marketing agreement. So it's not the same thing. You don't have employees. You don't have collective bargaining. What you do have are revenue sharing NIL deals. So he signed a marketing deal. He didn't sign. And I know that may seem like a petty difference to some of you. And I'm not a lawyer, but I've talked to enough lawyers about this stuff over the last couple of years that you can definitely question the legality of this. And, you also have to wonder whether there was consideration in the contract or not, which is another question. But I don't know if it's cut and dry to say that, hey, he signed a contract, he has to play there, you're not an employee. He signed a marketing agreement. If anything, he'll probably have to, pay 7 figures to get himself out of it. And then you talk about quarterback dominoes. So this just came across my desk. And this might mean he's a Cane. But Ty Simpson, the Alabama quarterback we've been monitoring, this is breaking news. He has told Alabama he's declaring for the NFL draft. Like, that just happened. That might mean he's a Cane, right? Carson Beck told Georgia he was declaring for the NFL draft. That's the road to Miami. Cam Ward the year prior, I'm going to the NFL draft. He winds up at Miami. So I don't know. And again, maybe Ty really goes through with it. I don't know what sort of draft feedback he's been getting. It's hard for me to imagine him being, a first or second day pick right now. I don't know if that's the feedback he's allegedly gotten. I think Ty Simpson could benefit for another year, and I think he could be a good fit at Miami. But as of right now, his plan is to enter the NFL draft. He has, I think, at least a week or two to change his mind on that, probably closer to a week. But Ty Simpson has just told the Alabama Crimson Tide, according to Pete Thamel of ESPN, that he's going to go to the NFL. And then, of course, if LSU does land Damon Williams, that means Miami might land whoever LSU doesn't. So there's a big domino effect here. Now, if it was Lane, this is a little ironic because Lane Kiffin, when this news broke last night, he was sitting right next to Sam Levaitt of Arizona State at a basketball game with Levaitt visiting LSU. And it was looking like LSU was really close to closing in on Levaitt. But apparently now it's like that meme of the guy walking with his girlfriend, and then there's like a perfect 10 that walks by, and his eyes are gazing in the other direction, right? Like, that's Lane Kiffin, which is like, that summarizes Lane Kiffin's entire life, right? But Lane is on a nice walk with Sam Levaitt, and suddenly Damon Williams catches his eye while he was at that basketball game with Levaitt. So Sam Levaitt, by the way, is reportedly has a visit coming up with Tennessee. And I think that visit came up after this Damon Williams things broke, but I wouldn't completely rule out Miami potentially landing a visit with Levaitt. I know there might be some character concerns with Levaitt, that maybe he's not on the top of Miami's list, but I don't know how prohibitive whatever that is would be if Miami does a little more vetting and could decide that Levaitt could be the guy for them. So I would keep my eyes out there. I would definitely keep my eyes out on Damon Williams because, when he became available, I got a text pretty much right away from the recruiting overlord, who's also the portal overlord, Brian Smith, who was telling me, he said, I think Damon Williams would be a really interesting fit in Miami's offense. Now, in terms of Williams, who has been with the Washington Huskies the past couple of years, he is a legit dangerous dual threat quarterback, which I love. I think in modern day college football, if you can get someone who's capable of throwing for over 3,000 yards while also rushing for over 600 yards, which is what Williams did this year at Washington, I think it's intriguing to me. 3,065 passing yards, 25 touchdown passes to 8 interceptions, completed just under 70% of his passes this year. He also averaged 4.3 yards per carry, which I think includes the sack yardage that gets deducted from that, 611 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. He's a dynamic playmaker, Damon Williams. Now, if you're going to nitpick, he's not a perfect necessarily prospect because he is short. He's listed at 5'11". So, you would have questions about his ability to see over Miami's massive offensive line. So obviously that would be up to Miami's coaches to evaluate and see how he would fit. But he's a playmaker. He is a play extender. He can be a scrambler. He is a multiple threat when it comes to scoring touchdowns through the air and on the ground. Like, Damon Williams is a really, really good player. And if Miami has an opportunity to pursue, assuming he's not just automatic to LSU, he did enter the portal with a do not contact tag, which tells you he might have an idea which school or schools he's interested in already. But if Miami has an opportunity, I think the juice could be worth the squeeze on this one. Also, there could be some buzz on Minnesota's safety, Coy Parrish, who's been in the transfer portal for the past 4 or 5 days. This guy had Parrish, who has played 2 years at Minnesota. First year under Corey Heatherman was a breakout season, like one of the best young defensive backs in the entire country. Took a little bit of a step back this past year, different defense, and I think they also tried to play him 2 ways. It just maybe didn't work the same way. But if Coy Parrish wants to have a renaissance under the defensive coordinator whose system helped him get where he got, which was on the map in 2024, playing with Corey Heatherman again could be a possibility. There was a report out of Minnesota that claims that, Miami could be pursuing him with Corey Heatherman leading the charge. So that's a player I would definitely look at outside of the quarterback position. Want to thank everybody so much for making Locked On Canes your first and your second listen today. If you missed our crossover episode with Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss, make sure to check it out. I predicted a 31-24 Miami win. He predicted a 31-24 Ole Miss win. So same score, different outcome. I like my pick a little bit better. We'll see how it plays out, and we'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.